every input we were getting on that weekend at the IRG was that things were not getting better, things were getting worse.
The Prime Minister says the final incident response group meeting before the Emergencies Act was invoked didn't fill him with confidence. Justin Trudeau told the Emergencies Act inquiry that having been reassured again and again that police had plans to end anti-COVID vaccine mandate protests, they no longer had any belief those plans would work and that the Emergencies Act was needed. And for the first time, Trudeau also outlined the government's legal position as to why it was able to call a public order emergency without CSIS seeing a national security threat.
A declaration of public order emergency under the Emergencies Act is about the governor and council finding reasonable grounds that there are threats to the security of Canada sufficient to invoke the Emergency Measures Act. So both the context and the purpose is very different.
The inquiry has tried to clarify how the Emergencies Act defines a public order emergency. It refers to wording within the CSIS Act to define a threat to national security which is needed to declare an emergency. Some argue this means CSIS must agree the situation is a threat to national security for an emergency to be declared. But the Prime Minister says that's nowhere in the Act. If the Governor and Council believe there is an emergency, one can be declared.
But I would put to you that when invoking the Emergencies Act, that threshold, the level of threshold of the security threat that must be met cannot be any lower than it is when CSIS is proposing to surveil one person, that the threshold is no different. Do you agree with that?
Yes, I do.
An attorney representing CONVOY organizers argued negotiations between the convoy and Ottawa could have ended protests if allowed to continue. But federal government attorneys pointed out the deal struck on February 13th was never to remove trucks from the city, just moving them off residential streets, and was not completed anyway. Instead, Freedom Corp's attorney settled for making a moral point.
When did you and your government start to become so afraid of your own citizens?
That's a very
unfair. I am
unfair.
not, and we are not.
In Ottawa, Xiaoli Li, City News.